Okay, ready to dive into the cola wars. It's more than just a preference for Coke or Pepsi.
Right. You got it. It's a whole century of rivalry. I mean, these drinks are tied up with American culture, global politics, you name it.
I've heard whispers of, like, corporate espionage even, maybe even violence.
Oh yeah, there are some wild stories out there. We'll get into all that, but first, I think it's amazing how both these companies, started out so differently from their image today.
Yeah, let's rewind to the beginning. Coca-Cola.
Hmm.
It's crazy to think it was first meant to be some kind of medicine.
Right, and not just any medicine, a cure for morphine addiction. The inventor, John Pemberton, he was a Civil War vet, got hooked on morphine after an injury. His first concoction was, get this, French wine cola, wine and coca leaves.
Wait, coca leaves, as in the cocaine plant.
The one and only. Back then, cocaine was totally legal, even seen as a possible treatment for morphine addiction.
Right.
Later, Pemberton dishes the wine, swaps in sugar syrup, boom, Coca-Cola is born.
So early Coke had cocaine in it. Man, how times have changed.
Oh, absolutely. As people learned more about the downsides of those ingredients, Coke had to, adapt.
And that's where Pepsi jumps in, right? Playing the pure card.
Exactly. Pepsi started as Brad's drink. Invented by pharmacist Caleb Bradham, his whole thing was avoiding those iffy ingredients everyone else was using.
So Pepsi was like the health-conscious option back then. Kind of ironic now.
Total role reversal, right. They even had slogans like the original pure food drink, just to drive the point home. That was their rivalry from the get-go.
But didn't Pepsi hit some rough patches early on?
Right.
Bankruptcy, wasn't it?
Yeah, 1923 they went bust. But the comeback story, it's almost unbelievable. It involves this guy, Charles Guth, a real piece of work. He'd actually been acquitted in a murder trial, and he ends up buying the Pepsi formula.
Hold on, a murder trial. What?
Oh, Guth was notorious, ruthless businessman. Story goes, he bought Pepsi out of spite because Coca-Cola wouldn't give him a discount at his drugstore. Can you imagine?
So from the start, it was personal, huh?
Seems like it. And Guth, with his aggressive style, he sets the stage for Pepsi's rise. New formula, moved the company to New York, and here's the kicker, he sold bigger bottles for the same price as Coke's smaller ones.
Classic undercutting. Did it work?
Like a charm. By the mid-30s, Pepsi was #2 in the soda world, right behind Coke.
Then things get a little complicated. Coke being so tied to the Jim Crow South, they basically ignored black consumers, am I right?
You are. Huge mistake. Walter Mack, Pepsi's CEO at the time, he saw that gap in the market, hired an all-black sales team to target black communities directly.
So Pepsi was being, well, progressive for the time, I guess.
It's complicated. It was groundbreaking for sure, but at the end of the day, it was still a business move. They found a market Coke had missed and went for it.
It's just wild how soda got mixed up in all these social and political things.
It's a fascinating case study, and this is really just the beginning. Wait till we get to World War II, the Cold War, all that.
Oh, I'm ready for it. This is already way more interesting than I thought it'd be.
Then let's go global. That's when things really get wild. World War II, man, it really shook things up for both Coke and Pepsi. Especially for Coke, I think.
Yeah, they practically became like a symbol for the American troops over there, right? Did that really help them go global?
Huge boost. Robert Woodruff, Coke's president then, he basically declared every soldier should get a Coke anywhere in the world for a nickel. Imagine that.
Wow, right in the middle of a war. That's some commitment. What was he thinking?
Part patriotism, part genius marketing. They shipped millions of bottles, even set up bottling plants right near the front lines. Coke became tied to like this feeling of home, and winning.
So like they basically made themselves part of the war effort.
You could say that. That's where you get that whole Coca colonization idea from.
Coca colonization.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really captures how like Coke was seen as America spreading its influence.
Exactly. American culture, consumerism, the whole package. And Coke was the poster child. But not everyone was thrilled about it, though. The French Communist Party, they saw it as like straight up American imperialism. They fought hard to keep Coke out.
It's crazy, a bottle of soda causing all this global tension.
Yeah. It shows how powerful Coke's brand was, how much it meant to be American.
Yeah.
And also that globalization, it wasn't always, a smooth ride.
Then there's the less glamorous part of Coke's wartime history, the whole Nazi Germany thing.
Ugh, yeah, not their proudest moment. Before the U.S. got involved, Coke was all over Hitler Youth rallies. There's even like swastikas in some of their German marketing stuff. Tough to look at.
Hard to square that with Coke's image today, that's for sure.
It is. Reminds you that companies, when they're chasing profits, they can make some pretty awful choices.
But wasn't it because of, like, trade embargoes that the German Coke folks ended up creating Fanta?
Yep. Fanta was born out of necessity. A wartime substitute for Coke, using whatever they could find. Funny how these huge brands have such unexpected origins.
So once the war ends, the Cola Wars heat up even more, right? Almost like a mirror of the Cold War, the U.S. versus the Soviets.
Oh, totally. Coke and Pepsi, they were fighting for every corner of the world. And this is where Pepsi's got a secret weapon. Donald Kendall. He ran Pepsi and he was, get this, best buds with Nixon.
Nixon, like the president.
The one and only. Kendall, he pulls some strings, gets Pepsi into the Soviet Union. First American product sold behind the Iron Curtain. Huge deal.
Wow, that's a big win. How'd they even make that happen?
Oh, it was interesting. They did these barter deals, vodka, submarines, even warships for Pepsi.
Hold up, warships. You're kidding, right?
Nope. Kendall even bragged that Pepsi was disarming the Soviets faster than the government. What a character.
That's unbelievable. And get this, Kendall's the reason Nixon put those tapes in the Oval Office.
You mean the Watergate tapes? Because of the Pepsi guy? Yep. Kendall was close to Nixon, thought the tapes would be good for a memoir, never imagined they'd lead to a whole scandal.
Man, the Cola Wars are tied up in some major history.
They are. And back in the U.S., Pepsi was doing their Pepsi Challenge, those blind taste tests, saying people preferred Pepsi over Coke.
I remember those.
Bold move.
Smart marketing, even if the science wasn't totally solid, got people talking, and that's half the battle. Pepsi was all about being the young, cool alternative to Coke.
But it seemed like Coke, they were kind of struggling to keep up in the 80s, weren't they?
They were. Roberto Goizueta, the new CEO, he was obsessed with beating Pepsi. Diet Coke was his big win, but then, oh boy, then came New Coke.
The New Coke disaster.
Yeah.
A lesson in what not to do.
Textbook case. They changed the formula, tried to make it sweeter, more like Pepsi. People hated it. They wanted the old Coke back.
You don't mess with the classics. Coke learned that the hard way. Brought back the original, called it Coca-Cola Classic. It was a hit. Some people even think the whole new Coke thing was a trick to boost sales through nostalgia. Who knows?
Wow, people really felt connected to the original Coke, huh?
It's crazy. The power of, like, nostalgia and brand loyalty. The Cola Wars, it wasn't just about taste. It was deeper than that.
And it just kept getting weirder in the 80s and 90s. They both tried to send their soda into space, right?
Oh, yeah, the space race. Whose soda would be the first in orbit? Special cans designed for zero gravity, the whole deal. Both Coke and Pepsi got their cans on the Challenger in '85.
Which ended tragically, of course.
It did. And there were other mishaps. Coke had their Magic Can promotion.
Wasn't that the one where some cans had, like, money in them, but also chlorine water?
You got it. It was a mess. People shaking their cans, the water spills out, people getting splashed. Even a kid ended up in the hospital.
Oh, man.
It's not good. Pepsi had their own scandal, the number fever contest in the Philippines. Printing error made it look like tons of people had won the grand prize, and Pepsi couldn't pay.
Oh, yeah, I vaguely remember that. Things got really bad, right?
They did. People rioting, bombings, people died. Tragic.
Really makes you think even a soda contest can have, like, these huge consequences.
It does. Shows what can happen when marketing goes too far and when you don't plan things carefully enough.
So what about now? Are Coke and Pepsi still at each other's throats?
The rivalry's still there, but it's different now. Social media, the decline of old school ads, they've had to, change things up.
And they both sell way more than just soda these days, right?
Oh, yeah. Water, juice, sports drinks, the whole 9 yards. They're like beverage empires now.
So the Cola Wars are more like a battle for the whole drink market.
You could say that. Maybe not as intense as it used to be, but they're still competing hard.
It's amazing how this rivalry, it started over 100 years ago, and it's still shaping how we drink today.
The power of brands, I guess. They adapt, they evolve, but they're not, perfect.
Yeah, they've definitely had some public stumbles along the way.
Oh, for sure. Like that Pepsi ad with Kendall Jenner trying to jump on the whole Black Lives Matter thing. Yikes.
What were they thinking? It felt so off, like they were making light of something really important.
Totally tone deaf. Trying to, like, profit off a social movement. Not a good look. The backlash was huge, and rightfully so.
It's a tough lesson, I guess. If companies are going to get involved with these kinds of issues, they gotta They got to be genuine about it, not just for show.
Absolutely. And Cokes had their own issues. Remember those lawsuits about their bottling partners in Colombia, the ones accused of working with paramilitary groups?
Yeah, that was pretty disturbing.
It shows how tricky it can be for these big companies operating in places where there's a lot of political stuff going on, human rights issues, all that.
It's like the Cola Wars. They've touched on so much: pop culture, global politics, even social justice.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Even something as basic as a soda, it can be connected to all these bigger things happening in the world.
So wrapping up, what's the big takeaway from all this? What does it mean for us, the people buying this stuff?
Well, I think it shows just how powerful branding and marketing are. How these huge corporations they really shape what we think, what we buy, and how the things we choose, they're not always, as simple as they seem.
I know I'll never look at a Coke or a Pepsi the same way again. It's not just a drink anymore. There's this whole story behind it.
That's the cool part of digging into this stuff, right? You realize there's so much more to the things we see every day. They have these histories, these stories that tell us about ourselves, about the world.
Makes you wonder, what other everyday things have these hidden stories, these secrets we don't even know about.
That's the fun part. There's always something more to discover, something to make you rethink the things you thought you knew.
Well, I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to what I buy, what brands I support, all that.
Yeah.
This has been eye-opening, really.
I'm glad to hear that. It's always good to look a little deeper, see those connections.
Thanks for taking us on this Cola Wars journey. Who knew there was so much to learn about Coke and Pepsi?
It was my pleasure. And hey, keep that curiosity going. There are tons of amazing stories out there just waiting to be uncovered.